Urbe Condita Libri, often shortened to Urbe Condita, is a monumental history of ancient Roman Latin begun sometime between 27 and 25 BC by the historian Titus Livius, known in English as Livy. The Latin title can be literally translated as books since the city's founding. It is often referred to in English, however, as the history of Rome. The work covers the time from the stories of Aeneas, the earliest legendary period from before the city's founding in c. 753 BC, to Livy's own times in the reign of the Emperor Augustus. The last year covered by Livy is 745 AUC, or 09 BC, the death of Drusus. About 25% of the work survives. Content. Corpus Urbe Condita Libri originally comprised 142 books, which in modern terminology would be considered chapters. 35 of these, books 1 to 10 with the preface and books 21 to 45, still exist in reasonably complete form. Damage to a manuscript of the 5th century resulted in large gaps in books 41 and 43 to 45, that is, the material is not covered in any source of Livy's text. A fragmentary palimpsest of the 91st book was discovered in the Vatican Library in 1772, containing about 1,000 words, and several papyrus fragments of previously unknown material, much smaller, have been found in Egypt since 1900. Most recently about 40 words from Book 11, unearthed in the 1980s. Abridgments. Livy was abridged, in antiquity, to an epitome, which survives for Book 1, but was itself abridged in the 4th century into the so-called Periocia, which is simply a list of contents. The Periocia survive for the entire work, except for books 136 and 137. In Oxyrhynchus, a similar summary of books 37 to 40 and 48 to 55 was found on a roll of papyrus that is now in the British Museum classified as Peoxy, IVO 668. There is another fragment, named Peoxy, she 1379, which represents a passage from the first book and that shows a high level of correctness. However, the Oxyrhynchus epitome is damaged and incomplete. Chronology. The entire work covers the following periods. Books 1 to 5 the legendary founding of Rome, the period of the kings, and the early republic down to its conquest by the Gauls. Books 6 to 15 the subjugation of Italy before the conflict with Carthage. Books 16 to 30 the first two Punic Wars. Books 31 to 45 the Macedonian and other Eastern Wars down to 167 BC. The following books are lost. Books 46 to 70 the period after 167 BC to the outbreak of the Social Wars. Books 71 to 90 to the death of Sulla. Books 91 to 108 to the Gallic War. Books 109 to 116 the Civil War to the death of Caesar. Books 117 to 133 to the death of Antony. Books 134 to 142 the rule of Augustus down to 09 BC. Style. Livy wrote in a mixture of annual chronology and narrative, often interrupting a story to announce the elections of new consuls. Collins defines the annalistic method as naming the public officers and recording the events of each succeeding year. It is an expansion of the Fasta, the official public chronicles kept by the magistrates, which were a primary source for Roman historians. Those who seem to have been more influenced by the method have been termed annalists. The first and third decades of Livy's work are written so well that Livy has become a sine qua non of curricula in Golden Age Latin. Subsequently, the quality of his writing began to decline. He contradicts himself and becomes repetitious and wordy. Of the 91st book, Niebuhr says, repetitions are here so frequent in the small compass of 4 pages and the prolixity so great, that we should hardly believe it to belong to Livy. Niebuhr accounts for the decline by supposing the writer has grown old and become loquacious. going so far as to conjecture that the later books were lost because copyists refused to copy such low-quality work. A digression in Book 9, sections 17 to 19, suggests that the Romans would have beaten Alexander the Great if he had lived longer and had turned west to attack the Romans, making this digression the oldest known alternate history. Livy's publication. The first 5 books were published between 27 and 25 BCE. The first date mentioned is the year Augustus received that title. Twice in the first 5 books Livy uses it. For the second date, Livy lists the closings of the Temple of Janus but omits that of 25 BCE. Livy continued to work on the history for much of the rest of his life, publishing new material by popular demand. This explains why the work falls naturally into 12 packets, mainly groups of 10 books, or decades, sometimes of 5 books and the rest without any packet order. The scheme of dividing it entirely into decades is a later innovation of copyists. The second Pentad did not come out until 09 BCE or after, some 16 years after the first Pentad. In Book IX, Livy states that the Ciminian forest was more impassable than the German had been recently, referring to the Hercynian forest first opened by Drusus and Ahenobarbus. One can only presume that in the interval Livy's first Pentad had been such a success that he had to yield to the demand for more manuscripts. There is no uniform system of classifying and naming manuscripts. Often the relationship of one manuscript to another remains unknown or changes as perceptions of the handwriting change. Livy's release of chapters by packet diachronically encouraged copyists to copy by decade. Each decade has its own conventions, which do not necessarily respect the conventions of any other decade. A family of MSS descend through copying from the same MSS. MSS vary widely. To produce an emendation or a printed edition was and is a major task. Usually variant readings are given in footnotes. First decade. All of the manuscripts of the first 10 books of Urbe Condita Libri, which were copied through the Middle Ages and were used in the first printed editions, are derived from a single recension commissioned by Quintus Aurelius Symmachus, consul, AD 391. A recension is made by comparing extant manuscripts and producing a new version, an emendation, based on the text that seems best to the editor. The latter then subscribed to the new MS by noting on it that he had amended it. Symmachus, probably using the authority of his office, commissioned Tatius Victorianus to amend the first decade. Books iix bear the subscription Victorianus amendabam dominus Symmachis. I Victorianus amended by the authority of Symmachus. Books vi8 include another subscription preceding it, that of Symmachus' son-in-law. This recension and family of descendant MSS is called the Nicomachean, after 2 of the subscribers. From its several MSS descend. Epigraphists go on to identify several hands and lines of descent. A second family of the first decade consists of the Verona palimpsest, reconstructed and published by Theodore Mommsen, 1868, hence the Veronensis MSS. It includes 60 leaves of Livy fragments covering books III. The handwriting style is dated to the 4th century, only a few centuries after Livy. Historicity. The details of Livy's history of Rome vary from mythical or legendary stories at the beginning to detailed and authentic accounts of apparently real events toward the end. He himself noted the difficulty of finding information about events some 700 years or more removed from the author of his material on early Rome. He said, the traditions of what happened prior to the foundation of the city or whilst it was being built are more fitted to adorn the creations of the poet than the authentic records of the historian. Nevertheless, according to the tradition of writing history at the time, he felt obliged to relate what he read without passing judgment as to its truth or untruth. One of the problems of modern scholarship is to ascertain where in the work the line is to be drawn between legendary and historical. The general modern view has been that buildings, inscriptions, Monuments in libraries prior to the sack of Rome in 387 BCE by the Gauls under Brennus were destroyed by that sack and were unavailable to Livy and his sources. His credible history therefore must begin at that date. A layer of ash over the lowest pavement of the Comitium, believed to date from that time, seemed to confirm a city-wide destruction. A new view by Tim Cornell, however, de-emphasizes the damage caused by the Gauls under Brennus. Among other reasons, he asserts that the Gauls' interest in movable plunder, rather than destruction, kept damage to a minimum. The burnt layer under the Comitium is now dated to the 6th century BC. There apparently is no archaeological evidence of a widespread destruction of Rome by the Gauls. Cornell uses this information to affirm the historicity of Livy's account of the 5th and 4th centuries BCE. Machiavellian Livy. Niccolò Machiavelli's work on republics, The Discourses on Livy, is presented as a commentary on the history of Rome. Translations. The first complete rendering of Urbe Condita into English was Philemon Holland's translation published in 1600. According to Considine, it was a work of great importance, presented in a grand folio volume of 1458 pages, and dedicated to the Queen. The authoritative translation of the history of early Rome was made by B.O. Foster in 1919 for Harvard University Press. A 1960 edition, translated by Aubrey de Salincourt, was printed by Penguin Books Limited. An online English translation is available. Bibliography. Considine, John. Holland, Philemon. Oxford Dictionary of National Biography. Oxford University Press. DOI 10.1093, Ref. ODNB 13535. Foster, B.O. 1874. Livy. Trollope Press. Livy, Christina Shuttleworth Krauss. Urbe Condita Book Vi. Cambridge. Cambridge University Press. Niebuhr, Barthold Georg, Smith, William, Schmitz, Lee and Hard. The History of Rome 3. Philadelphia. Lee and Blanchard. Seeley, J.R. Livy, Book 1, with Introduction, Historical Examination and Notes. Oxford, Clarendon Press.